you gorgeous individuals, it's Kav here, and today I'm going to be talking about why I love Simon. For those of you who follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you will have noticed that Love, Simon has very quickly become my favorite movie of all time. Whereas I have mentioned some of those reasons on my Twitter and Instagram, I wanted to make a video dedicated to all of the reasons that I love it so much, and today that's what I'm going to be sharing with you all. Now, this is not a review of the movie, this is just me talking about why I personally love it, why it relates to me so much. It's not a review of the movie, and this one will also not have spoilers. It's just going to be me talking about everything I love about the movie. So without further ado, sit back and let's get started in talking about why I love Simon. Okay, the first thing I love about this movie is probably the biggest and most obvious one. This is the first time that a gay character has been the main character of a mainstream movie picked up by a company as big as Fox. So that is just revolutionary and huge and will impact so many different teens and even adults. Adults have had this reaction to this movie because gay characters and queer characters are never the main characters of mainstream movies, and Simon is the main character of a mainstream movie. And going off of that, this is also not a sob story. There are some queer tragedies, and whereas I love some of those myself and there's nothing wrong with that, it's also just really nice to have a movie that is funny and that is romantic featuring a queer main character, so that it shows kids and teens and such that your life doesn't have to be a tragedy. Your life can be happy, and it deserves to be happy. Queer people deserve the same treatment as straight people, and they deserve to just live their lives as they do. So that is another huge thing about this movie, because it's not all tragedy. Yes, there are sad things that happen in it, but at its core it is funny and it is romantic, and it is a story about friendship and discovering yourself and being willing to share that with the rest of the world, and it's a story about love of all different kinds. So it is just so much more than just a tragedy. It is happy. It is a happy gay movie, and that is something we don't see. It's something we've never seen as a mainstream movie. It's something we don't see on TV or even often in books, because with queer characters it's always some sort of tragedy, but this one is so different, and I love that so much. Kind of going off of that, another thing I love about it is that it has a supportive family, and it has overall a supportive environment. And I've seen some people claim that that's unrealistic, which I think is BS, because I do have a supportive family. My family was super supportive when I came out as queer, and all of my friends are super supportive, and I know I'm lucky to have that, and that not everyone is lucky enough to get that, but those people exist too. It's possible to have a supportive environment, and I think movies like this will create more people being supportive of their queer friends or family members, because they see it on the screen. They see a family and friends who are supportive of Simon, and I think that that's a narrative that needs to be showcased more often to normalize that they can come out and be loved, and this movie shows that. And that was actually really relatable to my experience, because oftentimes the parents and the friends and family are not supportive, and that's an important narrative to show as well. There's no one coming out narrative, there's no one narrative for all queer people, but this one related to my personal story, and I think that we need to give that credit where it's due, because again, this is not something we see on a screen a lot. It's something we never see on a screen. This is also a movie that everyone can watch. It's not a rated R movie, and a lot of times movies with queer main characters are inaccessible to kids and teens because they are movies that are rated R, or they're indie films, and indie films are great, but kids and teens don't necessarily always have access to that. But they have access to this, most of them. Not everyone does, and I understand that there are countries that it's not coming out in and such, so I do understand that, but it's much more accessible than any other queer movie has ever been. So that is again huge and revolutionary, because like I said, kids and teens are gonna see this movie and their world is gonna be changed forever, like mine was. Another thing that I love about it, and this is probably my favorite aspect of it, is how authentic it is. It is an authentic portrayal of a gay teen, and the director of this movie is gay, so I know that he knew what he was doing and he knew what he was bringing to life when he was bringing it to life from the book. So everything in it feels so raw and genuine, and you genuinely feel and experience the same emotions as the characters on the screen. When you're watching it, you feel that, you resonate with that. Even if you're not queer, even if you're straight, you can still relate to it, because whereas it is catered in some way primarily to queer people, it also does have relation to people who might not be queer, because the authenticity does relate to Simon being gay. There is an authentic portrayal of that, but the authenticity does go above that, it goes beyond that, and it resonates inside the whole movie, in every different character's story arc and in every different character's journey. You still see that authenticity in it. And that leads me to my next point. Every different character had kind of their own story arc. Of course, Simon's one was his coming out and such, but we also got to see story arcs for Leah and Abby and Nick, Simon's best friends, and those were just as authentic and just as real and just as important to the overall narrative being showcased in this movie. And of course, now that I've mentioned Leah, I have to talk about her, because you all know that she is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and she was brought to life in the best way possible by Catherine Langford, and I'm so thankful for that. In one of the interviews I watched, Catherine described Leah as fiercely vulnerable, and I think that that's the best description you could give, and you could see that in the movie just the way I felt that when reading the book, and that resonates so strongly with me because I relate so much to Leah, and just watching her in this movie, though she wasn't the main character, she was still a very important character, and I still felt that same resonation with her, and I felt the same thing I felt when I was reading about her in the book. I felt the same way. I'm so thankful that she was brought to life by someone so talented, and she was put together so beautifully by the director and the writers and Catherine herself. And though Leah was the character I'm most related to, Simon was also very relatable to me in his narrative. Nick Robinson brought him to life in, like I mentioned a million times, the most authentic way possible. His struggle with wanting to come out didn't come from a fear of acceptance, it came from just not being ready, and I think that that's again an important narrative to show, because like I mentioned, there's no one coming out narrative, and that's true, but I think this brings to light one that we have never seen before. It shows one that is centered in support, but it also shows the same fear people have when it does relate to coming out, because that fear exists even if you know you're going to be accepted, even if you know you're likely to be accepted, you still have that fear, it's still there, and I really love that this movie shows that, because it's true, it exists and it's there, and it's a reality for so many people, and it was a reality for me too growing up. So I'm very thankful that his portrayal, like all the others, was so authentic and real. And I kind of touched on this earlier, I think that this movie can relate to so many people. In the trailer and of course in the movie itself, there's a line where Simon essentially says, "It's hard revealing yourself to the world because what if the world doesn't like you?" And that is very centered in his fear of coming out as gay, but it's also something that can go beyond that, and it kind of transcends this movie, because I think that's something we fear so much in society, because there's so much judgment, especially now with social media and everything. Judgment is a huge part of our lives, so I think that it just transcended the theater, because it can apply to any and every single person in this world, and it was probably my favorite line of the movie, because I could just feel that. It was something I felt for so long, all throughout middle school, for most of high school, and it's something that still affects me. Though I am much more confident in myself now and such, it's still a feeling I think everyone has on some level, because like I said, we live in a society that is judgmental, and one of my hopes is that movies like this that tackles those types of concepts can help lessen that. It can make us all supportive of each other. I hope that movies like this can shift the narrative to teach us to be more supportive, and that's another reason that I love that Simon comes from a supportive family and friend group, because it helps shift that narrative to that direction, and that's one of my hopes. And another line of the movie that I think is super important is again one that's in the trailer, and that is when Simon's mom is talking to him, and she says, "For a while now, it's felt like you were holding your breath, and you get to exhale now." And again, I think that that's a line that transcends the theater because it's something we can all feel when we're hiding aspects of ourselves. Like I said, this is centered in terms of Simon being gay, so it's centered in terms of things such as coming out, but it can also relate to anything you have to hide, anything you're forced to hide. And that's another thing I love about this movie. It is so important to queer kids and teens. As a queer person, it is so important to me to see a narrative like this. But it has these lines, it has these messages that transcend that and make it accessible to all people, no matter their gender or sexuality. It can be catered specifically to queer kids and teens, and I think that that's one of the main audiences we should be talking to about this movie because it was kind of made for us. But it also transcends that and can apply to any person in the world, and that's one of the most beautiful aspects of it because it has all these messages and these themes that are just so relatable to every person. But even though it has all of this deepness ingrained in it, it's still such a happy and funny and romantic movie. It's cute, it is fluff, and like I said, it does deal with important themes, so it's not purely fluffy. There are scenes that are very hard to watch, there are scenes that made me cry, but like the first half of it is just so fun to watch, and even after that it's still funny and cute and romantic. It's accessible, and that's kind of the point of this video. It's accessible to everyone in terms of its theme, in terms of its messages, in terms of how it's portrayed. All of that just contributes to the overwhelming beauty of this movie, and I really want to thank Becky and Greg for being brave enough to create this movie. Of course, we have to give a thanks to Becky for creating the book, which is incredible, and of course a huge thanks to Greg for being brave enough to put this movie out there into the world, because it hasn't just changed my life, it's changed so many other people's lives, and I can't wait to see it again and again and again till the end of time, because I highly doubt that any movie will ever manage to beat this one. At its core, this movie is me, and I've never had that before. They deserve thanks, but of course the entire cast and crew that went into creating this incredible film, and all of the people involved in creating the book, Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, all of those people deserve a huge thanks because they were brave enough to put this story out there. So yeah, that's why I love Simon. So that's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe because that stuff makes me happy, and go ahead and comment down below whether or not you have seen this movie yet, and if so, did it affect you as much as it affected me? As usual, all of my social media and my Goodreads will be in the description of this video if you'd like to follow me anywhere else. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day night wherever you are. Please remember, you're beautiful and you deserve the world, and I will see you soon for a brand new video. Goodbye!